income working families, which is a perfectly appropriate thing that you can only win through the kind of initiated community labor coalitions that Acorn and its allies led. The fact that you don't see many of those things now, I think indicates a problem. I think it's a huge gap that isn't being easily closed. I don't want to go into the millions of people that we help register, because that's not a citizens' wealth thing, but it is a civic accomplishment that I'm proud of with Acorn. The third thing had to do with achieving what I used to argue was maximum eligible participation, that even without the ability to pass laws in Congress, no matter how divided, there are entitlements that people are just not getting. A sad thing I heard in Youngstown, it was sad in the fact that it was tragic, is that I was speaking at Youngstown on Tuesday evening, and there's a very interesting organization that's building there, and two of their community leaders came, called Mahoney Valley Organizing Collaborative. And they kept trying to, once it got to the questions, they kept trying to wrestle with, because I put a thing on the PowerPoint, which is how much money you could still transfer to people in Ohio from programs that still existed that people were eligible for and just not receiving, which is the whole point of citizen wealth in terms of income security. And they just couldn't figure out, well, they kept saying, well, Wade, what keeps people, why aren't people getting that? So the notion of the resistance to people actually receiving benefits, the legal and other impediments that are put in front of people getting those benefits, it just wasn't computing that people couldn't get earned income tax credits, couldn't get food stamps, couldn't get, many of you who are involved in Acorn know the list. And those things that we started to do over the last, in the last 15 dozen years, like the 50,000 tax returns we were doing in 2007, those things make a difference when they start transferring huge amounts of money. As many of you know, there was a study done at Acorn, about 10 years of work in the mid-90s and around 2004. And an outside scholar reviewed the numbers. $15 billion were transferred from organizing campaigns that Acorn was involved in and led over to low to moderate income families. Of that, $6 billion of it was these living wage campaigns. And that was before the half dozen or so that passed in 2006. And so what that says, and I can't believe as hardened and jaded as we were as organizers, and certainly as cynical as I often was, why we didn't understand that we potentially were facing the likelihood of more repression based on the kind of success we were starting to get. Unfortunately, this shows how young and naive we were, even though, I'm old as dirt. But we'd organized forever. And we'd started, and the organization, at least when I left, was 38 years old. Yet somehow we'd forgotten those memories of organizing the first organizing committees in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, when the KKK would come break up the committee. We'd forgotten 1972 when legislators would pass acts in the Arkansas legislature demanding our membership list and declaring us communists. And those kinds of experiences, we were busy growing at Acorn. We weren't busy telling war stories. We didn't, hey, you should have been here when. This happened in 1973. It's what you were doing next became the culture of the organization, where we were going, how big you could get, how much might be possible. And I think, unfortunately, and I take some responsibility for it, it meant that perhaps the leadership was not as prepared to face the kind of assault that came in the McCain-Obama election, where Acorn became part of what was caught in what Herbert Marcuse used to call the flesh-eating machine of media. And, it just wasn't pretty. And, my position for years has been, I wasn't there at that point, so I just keep my mouth shut, but neither did I think we handled it all that well. And you can look at the lessons being taught now by How to Respond by Cecile Richards in Planned Parenthood, where you look for the opportunity to appeal deeply to your base, and you challenge the opposition by going to the base and living or dying based on their response. And even in these very polarized times, you can see the sort of, the Susan Komen Foundation is not a small little neighborhood business. This is a $330 million operation. And Planned Parenthood is 1.2, 1.1 and change billion. So it's not like the $700,000 in funding they were losing was that, I mean, Cecile wasn't going to wake up in a crying sweat like many of us might in the middle of the night saying, oh my God, what am I going to do about that $3.25 million? You know, that's money, but it's not. They looked for an opportunity, clearly like organizers, to create an example that gave them such a mobilizing opportunity to go to their base and see if their base would respond. And that's, had we not been smart enough or shrewd enough or well organized enough to realize that was our opportunity under attack to go to the base. So, you know, I think we have to learn. We have to learn these things in the kind of difficult work we're involved in. Part of the reason we put this book together, Global Grassroots, that looks at what people are running in other countries. Because part of what this sort of peaches and cream experience of how we start to see social change in the United States may have warped us to some of the real equation of what it takes and the price that's paid for change. And it's partly been educational for me in organizing around the rest of the world. You start to see different things that are harder to explain when you get an organizing report and you hear, well, this is being done in this particular community and it's being done by this volunteer leader organizer, and here Wade is the name he's using and here's his real name. And it's not. This is no big thing, no big paragraphs about that, no big, you know, but this is just a standard report I get. You know, last week we were doing a big rally in Korogochu, which is the mega slum where we organize in Nairobi. And we won a substantial victory last year in opening up what are called bursary funds, funds that had been dedicated to allow children of slum dwellers to have fees paid to be able to go to secondary school. Now, Korogochu has 350,000 people. There are, you know, less than 10 secondary schools in the entire slum. I actually think I probably overstated by half. I think there are 5 exactly. So, but there's no sense exaggerating. It's terrible under any term. So there's no way you can go, but you have to be able to pay the school fees. So this bursary fund was supposed to allow you to pay the school fees, get books, do what you had to do, but it got diverted to people who weren't living in the slum. You know, so the victory was actually rerouting the money so that we could actually get people. We did special needs applications, as I used to call them. I learned how to do this in welfare rights, you know, minimum standards. We had people fill out the forms. They were eligible. You had to get them. So we made it impossible to not give it to Korogocho residents who should have been able to go to secondary school. So we were having a big rally to expand this program to get more primary schools built, and brought together a coalition behind and with us, and they started the meeting. They'd gone all the way out, and they put together a couple of Kenya shillings, had puppets built. So they were going to have a march led by these puppets to the chief's office demanding more support for the schools. Well, unfortunately, about 45 minutes into the program, there'd been a bando-bando, let me see, a bando-bando is like a motorcycle, like a moped, and a guy had been driving, a young guy had been driving a moped, and in the process of some people in the community stealing the moped, they killed him. But now people had organized, I mean, there's no real police, I mean, there's no housing, I mean, so this is a mega slum, right? So it's not like, hey, let's call the police, see if the police can look into this, see if they can check the registration, start doing a, no, so they found a guy and they were bringing him in the process of beating him to death if he didn't admit where the bando was. They knew, in their view, he was the criminal and they were going to take. Well, this then came right into the same place where we were doing the rally. So all of a sudden, the police come, the military come, and the organizing report. So we decided we could not continue the meeting. You know, we will try to find pictures if we can find people who had camera. You know, it's like this. So, and you forget in the organizing challenges that are out there, and this is the kinds of things that are stories that are told by other organizers in other places in global grassroots, how much the tradition of community organizing has grown over the last number of years and shown real results, particularly in places like Korea and the Philippines, even in Nairobi.